All right, friends, welcome back. I'm going to do some comparisons here. So what's interesting is, and people aren't going to believe me, so I'm going to go get a tape measure. Okay. But the FXR and the modern 04 Up Sportsters are a much more similar bike than you think. They're also different in a lot of ways. So first of all, let's get our tape measure out here. Let's look at something interesting. Bottom of the frame, and these are all give or take measurements, guys. But bottom of the frame to the bottom of the neck is about 22 inches. Okay. Sportster, and it's a little harder to measure because my motor's still in. We're already at 22 inches, and look at that. It's like 22-ish inches, and it comes up a little bit more here, but that's kind of dead space anyway. So it's similar, it's very similar in the center of the frame. So the older Evo motors really weren't much physically larger than the Sportster motor, honestly. And they weren't cubic inch-wise, right? They were 73 versus 80. Now, here's the cool thing about an FXR. Look at all this neck reinforcement. Look at the size of that triangle. It's freaking super heavy duty. And you got kind of the double layer here that tapers out into the single box frame. So this is cool because, it is a square tube, but it's very, very reinforced. The neck is just stupid reinforced. But here's the interesting thing, right? So this is all square. On the Sportsters, they're round. And round tubes are quite a bit stronger, generally speaking, all else being equal. So does that amount of round tube make up for this being square, but much more reinforced? Hard to say without computer simulations and knowing the material, knowing the wall thicknesses, but just food for thought. Now, if you look down here, though, you've got two relatively big tubes. The neck is reinforced, but not nearly as much as the FXR, which is basically an Abrams tank. And then the frame actually tapers out in triangles to the bottom of the bike, whereas on the Sportster, it's actually straight. These two bars come straight down. And then under the seat, so this is like a half tube on Sportsters. Kind of interesting. But then you do have some triangulation. You've got your single tube that comes down here, and you've got two tubes that come there. They all meet at the swing arm, and then this top part. So it's actually triangulated pretty good under the seat. It just doesn't look like it because of the covers, and the material's not the thickest, but it's got a decent design there. Now, of course, the FXR has a full tubular triangulation structure on both sides, right, and under the seat, which people, always talk about. And then it actually comes down past where the swing arm goes. So the swing arm actually kind of like cuts through the frame, sort of, because the whole frame is triangulated into here. Whereas on a Sportster, it kind of ends. And it technically goes past because there's this little bar here, but it kind of ends there. It's a little different. But then weight-wise, they're actually only about 30, 40 pounds apart. Not the touring one. So imagine this was a regular FXR, not the RT. But they're only about 30, 40 pounds apart. All right, guys. So pulled up right here is just a little chart of the 04 to 08 Roadster. I cut it off from the 16 and 17 just because I don't know if the specs are different. And I looked this up for my 05. Then the FXR SSP, which keep in mind the FXR T also has very similar specs. I believe it's the exact same suspension setup as the SP. Regardless, for the sake of argument, call it equal. And then I left the FXDX up there as well, just for comparison. We'll get to that. So if you'll notice, wheelbase, which I actually measured in this video, is 60 inches on my Roadster, which is about what I got, and then 64.7. So my really haphazard tape measure readings were actually pretty close. Then total length, I didn't record for the FXR, but it doesn't really matter. It's just the same size wheels, give or take. So they're going to be very similarly, 4 inches longer. So the interesting thing was the weight. So the Sportster is 557 dry, and then the FXR is 570 dry. So they're only, they're really not that far apart. They're only actually like 13 pounds apart, which I just thought was interesting for a big twin like that. Now, again, that's not the RT, but the RT is probably only another 30, 40 pounds above that, so maybe 600. Then the FXDX, though, and really any Dyna, are like 632, so they're quite a bit heavier. although that's wet. So actually, I guess an FXDX isn't that much heavier than the FXR. However, the 6-speed Dynas get even heavier, but we won't get into that for this video. Ground clearance. I thought it was interesting. The Roadster is actually quite a bit lower. It's like half an inch plus lower. But then the interesting thing was lean angle. They bill it at 31, and the FXR is billed at 37, 35. So exhaust being the kicker on that right-hand side. So I'm pretty sure, and do not quote me on this, that the Sportster 31 degree is actually the right-hand side. They're just giving it the same rating on the left. Because my bike absolutely corners harder to the left than the right with stock exhaust because it gets in the way. So I believe if you change your exhaust out, you're probably really more at like 33, 34 degrees, if I had to guess, because you're getting a few degrees on both sides. So I don't think the lean angles are actually as different as this makes it look. However, I do believe the FXR does definitely have more lean angle, and that ground clearance usually is a big factor in that. So if we look at the FXDX at 34.5, 33.5, that's probably where the Roadster is with a stock exhaust removed. And like I personally have a little bit taller rear shock on my Roadster, so it's probably up there. Doesn't matter, just kind of food for thought. Seat height is about the same for all three. That feels about right to me. I sat on that FXR, and it's got a big touring seat on it, but it did feel a touch taller than mine, but that's just because that seat's a little wider. So I would say they're both similar height, seat height wise. It's just interesting how much they were able to squish that frame down on the FXR because it's seat height's the same basically as my bike, yet you get another half inch of ground clearance. So they really found a way to push that frame together despite the big twin motor. So kind of interesting. It's a really, really tight design for a big twin engine. It's smart. I mean, Eric Buell knew what he was doing. There's no doubt about it. I just figured I'd pull this chart up and interrupt the video for a minute. So whatever frame design you need for one bike, theoretically, to obtain the similar stiffness you would need for the other. Whereas a Dyna is 100 pounds heavier, so whatever frame that has is going to have to be even more overkill than like this to be just as stiff. Yeah, I mean, this is why people love FXR so much. So it's all in the frame geometry, guys. And I love this Sportster, and I think these are a pretty good frame overall. Are they as good as an FXR? I mean, probably not, right? Is the whole bike as a whole better or the same or different but good? I mean, I think it's just a different bike, right? It is still a little bit smaller. Wheelbase is a little bit less. If you'll notice, the FXRs have quite a bit of rake. More rake than you would think compared to a modern Dyna or even a early 2000s Dyna. And these Sportsters have real tight rakes. I'll do an axle center line to center line for you real quick here. Just a real ballpark. Guys, I'm still recovering from being sick, so if I'm huffing and puffing a little bit, I'm not that out of shape. It's about 62 center to center. It's a real rough measurement versus how much? 66, 65, 66. So the FXR, mainly because of the rake, is a much longer bike. Here's an interesting stat. Front to the back of the seat. Now on FXR, let's see where we're at. 29. This is actually a little bit bigger than I thought, 27 and a half. So you've got another couple inches of rider. Space, which is really nice. So kind of neat, right? The FXR is a similarly sized bike, but gives you 2 more inches of space for a rider and a passenger. That's a lot. It's actually very helpful. And with this whole touring setup like this, I mean, it's a pretty comfortable bike. So this is why FXR is so popular, right? I mean, you've kind of got Sportster heritage with, touring and longer distance comfort ability. So it's really, really kind of interesting. But what else can we compare? Forks are identical, basically. I mean, this is the more old school shape of the lowers and stuff, but they're the same thing. Actually, I say that. Are these? No, these are 35s back then, aren't they? They're inch and a, whatever, 3/8 maybe. Where am I? Inch and closer to a half. Yeah, I think these are 35 millimeter. Mine are 39. So that'd be a good upgrade on these. Do some inverted or thicker forks. I forgot. Yeah, they have the old Sportster front ends from back in the day. But yeah, other than that, single piston brakes instead of the duals. So the brakes are quite a bit better probably on a modern Sportster, I would assume. But yeah, nothing you can't upgrade. So if you were to ask yourself Sportster versus FXR, not as different as you think. Also more different than you think, maybe. But cornering clearances are similar, weight's similar, design in some ways is similar, also different. But yeah, you decide what kind of riding you're doing, if it's worth going with one over the other. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. God bless America, and I'll see you on the next one.